Good morning. Welcome to the Ag and Food Finance and Policy Division. I know some people will be coming in and out. We've got a busy day. There are other committee meetings being held today, and we've got the opportunity to have a number of people come before us to testify, so we're pleased to be able to have that. So welcome back, everyone. We're here in an interim hearing, which means it's really an informational hearing. We don't have a bill before us. What we have is information and people sharing different aspects of their worlds and how it intersects with the work that we do. So we appreciate that. We're focusing today on a topic that touches everyone. It's the climate change, the weather changes. We have spent some time as a committee on talking about effects in the past, and we will do probably some more of that. We wanted to get a little bit more of a detailed look at what happened, especially in 2019. But our panel of producers, farmers, commodity groups, and people who are connected to the effect of weather changes, we weren't able to get as many people together to be able to do that part today, so we may be doing some more with that later in the session. But today we're going to talk more about solutions and really kind of get everybody on the page of this is what is being done, for us to be aware of that. I know that we'll have other legislators that are going to be interested in this topic. There's been some emphasis on talking about climate change and having other meetings around that topic. And not everyone comes to the ag meetings, and not everyone is as aware of the things that we've been talking about. So trying to make sure that people are aware and that we put that out there for people. Certainly we know that 2019 we had some extreme weather from the very beginning. About a year ago, we were talking about collapsed barns, the roofs of barns, and remember the snow that we had last year and what the problems that caused. Then we had a really wet spring, we had a really unusual summer time, and then how the harvest was impacted as well, and early frost and how that impacted some. So there's definitely issues that we can be talking about. And our farmers continue to get up every day and do the jobs that they need to do to help to feed us all. So we're thankful for the work that they do. Today we're going to probably focus a little bit more on research and on, like I said, solutions, practices that have been coming forward either in pilot projects or in larger scale, and for us to learn a little bit more about locally how things are being done and or on a statewide or even national wide, what are some of the things that are being done. So, and the other thing I just want to mention, I know this afternoon the Governor's Biofuels Task Force is meeting, so we've got people that are going to be needing to go to that this afternoon. So, and we have today is a big day for pork, and tonight the Taste of Elegance. I just want to remind everyone, if you're available to go to that, it's a very tasty event, and if you have the opportunity to go, that would be great because you can have an opportunity to taste a wide variety of pork as it's been presented by different chefs throughout the state here. So that will be fun to go to if people are available to do that as well. And then I just, before we kind of get started, I know that Representative Brand, you wanted to talk about a group here.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to recognize a group in the audience tonight in the back row there. Ben Penner, a local farmer, and also a professor at Gustavus Adolphus College, with a bunch of Gusties here today in the audience as well. They're taking a J-term class specifically dealing with the discussion topic today. And so I just wanted to welcome them and thank them for being here today.
Excellent. Welcome. We're glad to see, we have a number of people in the audience, and it's good to see students and people that have an interest in this topic. So we welcome all of you. And I know that we're also probably being televised today, so that's good to be able to spread the message out as well. So, so first up, we have on the agenda responding to a changing climate, and we have members of the executive branch. The commissioner is here from Department of Ag, so we're going to start out with Commissioner Peterson. We welcome you. Happy New Year. We're glad to see you, and we'll begin with you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Again, my name is Tom Peterson, Commissioner of Agriculture, and I also have
Peter Chesset, the Director of Government Affairs at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture.
So thank you for having us here today to talk about this very important issue of responding to climate. And I like how you frame it too about what's being done or what are we working on. And so when before I took this job, I was very interested in watching Governor Walz and his discussion and some of the work that he did while he was in Congress, whether it was on soil health and CSP, a lot of different things as we talked about it. And this was an issue that he brought up quite a bit while he was running, was something that he wanted to discuss. So as commissioner, we've tried to make this a priority of working within our sub-cabinet too, and then just within our agency. So we're going to share some of that with you today. I just want to kind of lay out the climate. Really, you can't do it without looking at our challenges that we had this past year. And this is a slide I've been using that we put together in November, and we could have filled it up even more. I just said to our communications staff, I said, could you find like just headlines of things that didn't go so well this year? And it wasn't hard to do. You know, and some of the ones that we wanted to highlight was, you know, as you said, the barn collapses were a big piece. Low farm income was, you know, continually a headache. Trade and shortages of things that happened, plant closings. We just continued to have on. But the one that I didn't add that came right after we had put this slide together was that, you know, towards the end of November, we officially, 2019, became the wettest year on record. And for many parts of the country and the state, this was on top of last year, or 2018, which was also wet for very many parts of the state. So we're holding a lot of water pretty much all over the state right now. And so I think that just kind of highlights everything that we had. And I also want to highlight what are called prevent plant acres for those of you who are not really familiar with agriculture. So these are acres that did not get planted in Minnesota. 20 million acres around the country, but in Minnesota, 1.17 million acres, which placed us sixth in the nation. A lot of corn. We had prevent plant acres, but you can see some of the other things. I wanted to mention this, and I was glad this slide was in here because in prevent plant, we saw some opportunities. Part of qualifying for insurance is then you do have to use a cover crop. So on a lot of this land, farmers are planting cover crops for the first time. We've seen prevent plant, and we've had this for many times. We had about 5-6 years ago, we had a lot of prevent plant acres, not this many, but in southern Minnesota. And what I would do in talking to farmers back then was it was the first time they had used prevent cover crops, and they experimented, but then they continued to use them. Because I would ask farmers in my travels, when did you start using cover crops? And some of them, it was because of this. And so it was really interesting. One of the challenges we had, even going to 1 million acres, was cover crop seed. A lot of people use oats for cover crops, but we had a lot of issues with people finding even oats to go or ramp up that fast. So as everybody's excited about cover crops, I'm excited about cover crops, but as we think about marketing and ramping up, we could see it like this year as well. So that's just one issue I want to bring up in this discussion. We wanted to talk about listening to rural residents. We were going to have this really fancy graph about where we've been and everything this year, but I wanted this one that you could just kind of see the travels. This is my on my whiteboard in my office of all the places that I traveled in 2019. And I wanted to highlight that we really covered a lot of ground. And as talking about climate, there were certain things that really hit me as we're talking about the adoption of cover crops and no-till. And so we're talking about sequestering carbon, keeping it in the soil, that we really saw that rose to the top. And so as we traveled the state, it became really clear to me that there was a ton of interest in this, really growing interest. So Peter and I, we were, for example, in Red Lake Falls. We did a tour of a farm at 9 o'clock at night. We were running behind that day. We called them. Luckily, it was summertime. But this farm, the Miller farm there, they grow 10 different commodity crops with 20 different cover crops. And it was really interesting to see firsthand, but also visit with them the challenges they have and the ideas that they have. But they're growing the main crops like wheat, soybeans, sunflowers, but they're also intermixing different cover crop varieties and then inviting the public out to their farm. Just to the west of there, I rode along with some sugar beet farmer during the harvest, and one of their agronomists, and he told me that 40% of American crystal sugar now are using cover crops mixed in with their crops, and so they continue to grow and move forward. And again, cover crops are not going to work everywhere, but they are taking off, and there's more information. Down in southwest Minnesota, we were in Okabena. I should mention that's the hometown of Commissioner Place. They're very proud of her there, and went to one of her neighbors' farms, Larry Leopold, who many of you, if you go to the Pork Congress tonight, you'll see him. He's a past president of the pork producers, and he had a reduced tillage day, and he's been doing reduced tillage and strip till for many years. Just to see the farmers that are coming out there and seeing the different practices. To my own area of Pine City, where we held the 500,000 acre being enrolled in our water quality certification with one of my neighbors, John Stevens, who about 5 years ago started putting cover crops back into his mix. Where he's realized too, I think a lot is as a cattle feed. And so FYI for the Ag Committee, we have a shortage of forage in Minnesota this year, and that's a really big issue. So when we look at the impacts that these crops are going to have, that can be a real positive. Just a couple more I want to highlight is Redwood Falls. Many of you know the bright crises and some of the things that are happening in Minnesota. We have Office of Soil Health. We have a Soil Health Coalition that started this past year, and they held their kickoff this summer at their farm in Redwood Falls, and I think they had about 250 people there. It was an amazing turnout. But it was interesting for me to look around in that crowd and see the farmers that were there were really there to learn and wasn't the typical crowd that I saw. And so that to me was really, really impressive. And one thing I just want to highlight too is in my map of I have a few holes in there, and the first place we already filled this year was up in that northeast area. And talking to Representative Lewick, we made it up to just north of his to Grand Rapids the first week of this year, and toured the research station there and talked about the forestry and importance of forestry. And we're really seeing that taken off. And I always want to put that into, we think more about DNR, but I think there's a real strong component to forestry and tree plantings within agriculture. So, you know, a lot of farmers have woodlots. They have opportunities to use trees. And so we're trying to work through that as much as possible. Today, too, I just want to highlight biofuels as we have the first meeting of the governor's biofuels task force this afternoon at the Department of Agriculture, and don't have to read all this. Just Minnesota has always been a strong leader in biofuels, and we're really looking at how we keep that ball up in the air, but how we recognize the changes that have taken place in ethanol and biodiesel. I think that we surveyed our members of the task force. So one of the comments that came back to me is how much biofuels have changed in the last 20 years, and that we haven't done as good a job as we could talking about the life cycles and different changes that are happening. So we hope that in a future hearing that we'll be able to discuss some of that. The Governor's Biofuel Council is part of our climate initiative within the administration. We have a 15-member council that will advise the governor and cabinet on the best ways to expand the use of biofuels and how to increase carbon efficiency and implement biofuels as a part of larger goal to reduce greenhouse gases in the transportation sector. I was really impressed too. I think for the 15 seats on there, we had almost 70 applications. very well-rounded group of people. And so really look forward to visiting more with you about that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter. We're going to walk through or have some other staff walk through our other loan programs. I just want to editorialize on a couple of them. We're going to talk about our water quality certification program, our Ag BMP loan program, our sustainable agriculture demonstration grants, specialty crops, and Forever Green. I want to also highlight not just farms, but when I'm meeting with companies, whether it's General Mills or Land O'Lakes, Cargill, they all have climate platforms or things that they're using or working on with farmers and their products, and it's a top priority for them as well. I think about, too, how you support, the programs that we're going to come forward are going to be important, whether it's helping farmers, adopt cover crops, do reduce tillage. We needing to continue to grow our markets for alternative crops. And I'll leave you with this on the alternative crops piece, too, because I want to always work hemp into this, because I do think it shows farmers will plant another crop if they think there's a market there. And so we went from 7 growers our first year to almost 400 this last year. Our hemp sign up is open right now, and it's very strong this year too as well. So when we just think about these different crops that are coming that we've been talking about for many years, whether it's pennycress or camelina or different things, that's kind of one of the things that I think gives me hope, as well as all the things going on. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Peter, and I'll be around for questions.
And Commissioner, before you turn it over, we're just going to stop for a second. I know there might be some questions. So Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, thanks for being here. You talked about the growing interest in cover crops and such, but I think there's a little bit of confusion, at least among farmers this past summer, trying to find oat seed, for example, going to their local elevator. And we have some laws that govern bin-run seed for planting seed. Could you go over that and tell us how farmers can procure cover seed and yet stay in alignment with our state seed laws?
Madam Chair and Representative Anderson, I'm not an expert on that. I don't know if you and Commissioner Place really focuses on that. The issue we had was people basically selling out of their bin, is just to put it, and so what would happen then is that it wouldn't grow. And so we do have a certified seed and seed inspection that we do, is my basic understanding. And the problem we had with the low run amount of seed was that the complaints that we got were people had bought, oat seed from their neighbor and it didn't germinate. And so that is what we look at. So I'd have to give you more information. We could do that to the committee.
Well, Madam Chair, Representative Anderson, I can speak to that for a bit. So one of the issues that we're very concerned with at the department is just consumer protection. We want to make sure that producers that are interested in buying those cover crop seeds are actually getting what they're paying for. Now, we are talking within our plant protection division about ways to clarify and perhaps simplify some of that labeling processes, but it's an ongoing conversation that I think we'll be having up here even this session.
Representative Anderson.
Just a quick follow-up. Thank you, Madam Chair. Any other incidences of Palmer amaranth that came this summer because of cover crop seed that may have been impure?
Commissioner.
Madam Chair and Representative Anderson, yes, and thank you. And I also want to thank the legislature, too, because the last 2 bienniums you have invested in help for us for our noxious weed program. And we have basically, to me, been able to limit our reports of Palmer amaranth in the state. So we had 2 counties, Houston and I believe Lyon or Lincoln, one of the counties in Lyon in western Minnesota. So we've limited to 2 counties this last year, and they, I forgot the exact way. One, it may have come in on a truck, or it can come on a different, but the other one is still under investigation. but we have been able to limit that, and a lot of that has to do too with exposure from working with the soybean growers and some of the other organizations. University of Minnesota Extension's been really good about having farmers identify it and watch out for it. We've also have taken action on some of the seed that's come in the past and been able to limit that. So I think there's just a greater awareness. But if you know, in Iowa, just south of the border, they have it in over 50 of their 99 counties, where we've been able to limit it for now to just a handful.
Thank you. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Commissioner. My question's a little bit different since we're in a climate hearing, and when I am traveling around the state, I see a lot of infrastructure, a lot of barns with south-facing slopes or machine sheds or buildings that are part of the old homestead, but there's still electricity going to those places, or that there are people living there. And so with climate, I'm wondering if the administration, if you've looked at, could the low-interest loans through the Rural Finance Authority be used for solar installation on barns or machine sheds, or silos, or buildings that are in farm country that there are a lot of, that could help reduce costs for farmers and help on the climate side as well. Or even just installing, I think at Morris, they have shade solar that cattle can go under. So things like that with the energy side of it, with reducing energy costs, using solar, which is becoming cheaper and cheaper. And then the second thing is many power producers now charge for the hookup for solar. And although that's sometimes it varies, but with the federal government no longer doing the tax credit for solar, if the state would provide maybe a rebate for that hookup charge to reduce the cost on trying to install solar. So my questions are kind of on the loan side or the grant side, if there's things that we can do to incent solar in Minnesota, particularly in the rural areas.
Commissioner.
Madam Chair and Representative Hansen, we have been working within the RFA to see like if some of those pieces would qualify. And I'll have to double check with you, but right now I don't think that we've issued any, just because of the competitive. So our loans for like our equipment loan, we may need like a tweak to allow that, but it hasn't been a big piece that we've been asked. But we do work a lot and visit with the companies quite a bit about different pieces. One of the things, or promotion, is that we've learned is that farmers always have a great intention about putting solar on their roofs, but they switch to an on-ground just because of maintenance and not sure how long the building's going to be there. And so I think that a lot of the farmers, as they get excited about solar and say, oh, I'm going to put it on my roof, but then when the company gets out there, they kind of talk them through it. And that's been one of my experiences. Some still do, but I think that but they'll still do it. They'll just put it like on the tree line. We see it, again, on different hog facilities, turkey facilities too, where they have the 10-acre lots now lining the perimeter with solar panels, or the driveway. And so we'll keep continuing to look at that. The shade at Morris, I also visited that this summer, and I thought that's really promising. A lot of the companies are really, it's one of the issues we work on because of tax base and issues. And so if you're grazing cattle under those, you might be able to work the property tax piece a little bit as well. And then the hookup is not something that I work on per se, but it's definitely an issue I hear. The issue with the hookup is that it varies between co-ops. It can be anywhere from $0 to $80, as I understand it. And I think that's interesting. I just would take this opportunity to say one other issue that our staff works on our planning is looking at where larger scale solar is being placed in communities. And the issue of using productive land or non-productive land or highly erodible land. And we have a task force that's been working through some recommendations with the Department of Commerce on that. And I think that that's one of the big issues. People will say, I'm for solar, but is this the best land to put it on? Or, and then how long does it exist there? And so those are some of the issues we work for, but also interested in the financing part, and I'll keep working on that.
Thank you. And I know this afternoon we'll hear a little bit more about the University of Minnesota and their research, and solar may be a part of that as well. So I think we're ready to move on. So Mr. Chesset.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. You mentioned at the outset, Madam Chair, that we're going to hear about research and on-the-ground implementation. And certainly the Minnesota Department of Agriculture does, we engage on the issue of climate change in multiple, various ways, including the research. And you might hear a little more about that later. But a lot of folks have expressed interest in what we're doing on the ground, on the farm. And so we thought we'd spend some time at the beginning of our presentation just highlighting a couple of our programs that are all about on the farm, on the ground implementation. And so to kick us off, we have Brad Redlin with our Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. It's Brad Jordahl Redlin, Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program Manager. I want to take this time today, thank you for having me, to describe an opportunity that really Minnesota alone has in addressing climate issues and all those things that intersect with it and actually extend out from it, really through this vehicle that we have that other states do not, and that's being the Ag Water Quality Certification Program. So I want to kind of step through the processes and really components that provide this unique opportunity. Starting first with just a quick review of what we do when we water quality certify farms. It's a risk assessment that takes place, really searching out for those risks that are posed to water on farms. But that risk assessment process is really a way of looking at all parcels on a farm, the row crop acres, pasture acres, whatever it may be, and to see what risks may occur. It's not ultimately rocket science. You look at the soil characteristics, you look at the slope, you look at the history of precip on a monthly basis compared to what might be covering the ground during those typical months during that point of the rotation. You just look at the tillage that occurs and fertilization, chemical management, all those things. And that's really what we do, is do a whole farm assessment, looking for those risks and finding really the baseline for what's taking place. And of course, what we do is ultimately, when certifying a farm, is give them that 10-year contract that says you'll be performing these levels of stewardship and management on your farm that has earned you this certification. And we have that contracted then with them that we're there to provide our service for that continued 10-year period. That's the program or the process of delivering a certification, but our approach to getting certification delivered is really all about partnerships. We house the program at the Minnesota Department of Ag, but we're your full partners with our Board of Water and Soil Resources, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. We have the state-level partnership that provides great benefits across program delivery and informing the delivery that we do from those other agencies, and also I appreciate having them today too, because they're going to talk about in some more greater detail with Bowser's talk about the soil health efforts and conservation delivery that we do in partnership with them, and Pollution Control Agency talking about the climate impacts and mitigation and adaptation opportunities in agriculture. So I don't have to go into quite so much detail on those items, but do want to feature those partnerships. The central partnership in terms of delivering a program is our Minnesota Soil and Water Conservation Districts that exist in all the communities around this state that are I always call them the central nervous system, or the spinal column of our program. It's that local delivery of conservation and expertise that really provides the service that our growers seek us out for. And at the federal level, we do have our partners there that have been with us from the very beginning too, Natural Resource Conservation Service, the USDA, who have recently, we're proud to say, has awarded us another 5 years of the Regional Conservation Partnership Program award. That's another $9 million that goes not into our coffers, but out into the community for the providers and the farmers themselves for adopting practices. It's not a penny that comes to our bottom line, but it's all the USDA commits to those growers who participate in water quality certification. So that's our public partners, but our private partners are where we are working a lot and where we're really growing. We have a longstanding MOU with the Land O'Lakes, and we recently received the first ever public-private partnership award from the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture for that partnership as an example to the rest of the nation. We participate in the Field to Market Consortium. That's national agriculture corporation, global agriculture corporations, and we as a program are one of the few state representatives that participate in that group. And we have regional partnerships where we work very closely with, as I've said, Land O'Lakes. Hormel Foods is working with us in 2 watersheds. We have Central Farm Services is a local regional co-op that delivers services to their grower. When we all work together like that, what we're really doing is just plussing up the services that we all provide the growers in cooperation and complementary fashion to really provide greater service to growers, and that kind of public-private partnership is central to our work and something we definitely want to continue to do. And it's something worth noting too that we even have a private industry that brews beer that gives away 12 packs to our certified farmers, so I don't want to go across the slide without mentioning that. But what we do, as Peter said at the outset, is that we implement practices. We go out and assess for risk, and then we implement practices that the farmer chooses. The farmer determines what means they want to use to mitigate concerns or to adopt things that they are interested in doing on their farm. And then we provide that technical and financial assistance to provide that implementation. Very small print, whole lot of practices, but that's just a flavor of the stuff that happens through our program essentially every day. We are out there providing the services, treating the resource concerns, and successfully supporting our growers who participate with us. And we're proud of the results that we're getting so far. I guess I'll note this morning, I got a text from my staff person, so as of this morning, I can update the numbers to 829 certified producers and 66,200 acres under certification. So it does change essentially daily. And it's great to see that kind of participation continue to grow. But you see just a snapshot here of new practices that are adopted in order to obtain certification. We record with the assistance of our, again, other agency partners, Bowser in particular, and Pollution Control Agency, in assessing what those practices are achieving, and we've got some sample numbers there, but that's what happens for the newly adopted practices that folks have taken to participate in certification. There's certainly a great deal of conservation out there on the ground when we arrive, if you will, at the farm, and it's something that we do note and track and obviously credit them for. Unfortunately, I don't get to report that in the same way I get to report these, because that's just already earned benefit that they're creating. But at the same time, if we're reporting outcome numbers, we certainly want to restrict that only to what we can claim, and our local partners can claim responsibility for having actually implemented. So that's what those numbers come from. And we do, as a state, as a partnership, we're looking forward. We are identifying what is really obvious. It's not a great feat to identify that when you're out there treating these risks, treating the resource concern as we are, that you're adding multiple benefits. There's co-benefits to the interventions that occur naturally. So we have created endorsements, if you will, for people who are already engaged with us and might perform additional or extra credit, if you will, activities that may not be strictly water related. But while we're on the topic of things like integrated pest management to combat the resistance that we see, we say, well, let's take an extra step, if you like, to combat or use the techniques that would combat the growing resistance challenges we see in weeds and other pests. So we have an endorsement for that. We have an endorsement that's been developed for wildlife habitat that also can be certainly expanded through the work that we do. Soil health practices, which are really central to water quality certification and central to climate, which I haven't forgotten about. We're driving towards that point. It's the soil health component that most strictly answers all these concerns, if I could be that bold. And we are certainly as well looking forward on the climate practice and mitigation because this is the opportunity in agriculture right now because it is the challenge that they are facing as the frontline recipients of the weird weather. They are also the frontline opportunity to achieve mitigation adaptation for those challenges that are presented to them. And first or primarily, I think, and from my personal perspective in engaging on this, it's also an opportunity for them to extract earned benefit from the marketplace for the value that they're providing when they do the interactions and the interventions that we talk about. So what we've started to do already with, again, the partnership of our fellow agencies is we've begun tracking the climate impacts of the practices that we are installing. It's not just the nitrogen reduction, phosphorus reduction, sediment, soil loss numbers I've already given you, but we're now tracking the emission reductions that occur through those new practices that are installed. You see that about 50 to 60% of the practices that we install have a corresponding item that PCA has identified through their research, and they'll be talking about it later, I'm sure, of really 21 practices and the emission reductions that they can achieve in agriculture interventions. And we find that of those host of practices I shared with earlier, about 50 or 60% of them correspond with one of those 21 table items on that table. And we see that we get 37,000 CO2 equivalent tons of emission reductions from those practices. On average then, on each practice implemented, that's about 37 tons of CO2 equivalent emissions reduced per practice. What's that mean? I didn't know myself either. That's about 7 or 8 passenger vehicles off the road each year. Just that one practice of that reduction. That's about what it equates to in a way that at least helps me visualize it a little better. So we are excited about the achievement that is occurring every day just in the conduct of our work, but we're also excited about the opportunity to do more in the realms of not just mitigating emissions, but the adaptation component to be able to build resiliency in our agriculture because we want agriculture to be viable and to be able to meet the challenges that are ahead. Again, what certification does through the conservation interventions that we do is primarily a soil health focus. When we add the thousands and thousands, tens and thousands of acres of cover crops that we do, or the tillage revisions, or the nitrogen efficiency that occurs, it's all really in support of soil health, and it's what the benefits are received is through soil health. The water infiltration to assist the grower under conditions of excess high volume precipitation, or the sponge nature of the field that will assist it when drought challenges arise from the wild and weird weather. It's certainly a risk management effort to have a greater resiliency in your farming operation that can withstand these changes, which becomes very literal when you talk about USDA's risk management agency and crop insurance. The Risk Management Agency own report says that climate's going to increase their costs between 10 and 30% over the next few years, and without adaptation, it would be that high, 10 to 30% increased cost for the growers and for really all the taxpayers that support it, and then certainly the carbon storage. But what all those components really lead me to is that opportunity to extract value for the growers for what they've earned. They've earned this value, and that may not always be being realized now in the most direct way. And so there is a lot of conversation going on about marketplace opportunities. They might be called pay for performance. They might call it credit market systems, ecosystem services payments. There's a lot of discussion on those aspects, and we've certainly been engaged in those conversations on a local, state, and national level. And what we've been able to identify, but perhaps more telling to me is what folks that we have been engaging with have told us is there are 3 primary components, if you will, to intervening in a marketplace in these ways. First being that if you're going to be identifying a market value for an additional service, ecosystem service, call it a credit or whatever you want, if you will, you're going to have to know existing conditions. You have to know the baseline conditions to determine what is new and additive to create and earn, new action that earns that credit. So one way or another, if you're going to integrate with the marketplace, you're going to have to set baseline. Advantage of ag water quality certification, these marketplace folks have reported to us, is that we do that risk assessment. We look at every parcel, every rotation. We see every implement that's going on. We see the fertilizer management. We have a baseline that no one in the nation currently has when they look at a farm field. We already have the baseline in place. We know what current conditions are. Secondly, you have to know what's additive. Well, obviously, when we do our work, we have set that baseline, and then we intervene with the practices and management that the farmer chooses to adopt to obtain certification. Well, that's your additive right there. That's your new practice. That's what's earning the credits, earning the mitigation and adaptation benefits for the conservation and the climate. And it's there. It's mapped and tracked privately at Department of Ag. We don't share that information for the growers' sake, but it is mapped and tracked and available for proving out, and it's under a 10-year contract, as we've said, with the growers. So the marketplace knows that service is there and being provided. And then thirdly, a critical pillar that like I said, editorialized, I don't particularly like that this is a pillar, but it is that in our conversations, the folks have identified to us that a primary issue here is the ideal of earning a payment. There's concerns about providing payments to producers who are, it's uncomfortable to talk about. They say they don't want to pay the polluter. There's people who create these marketplaces and they say, well, we got somebody doing something wrong and now you're going to pay them to stop doing that thing that is wrong. And we don't really abide by that when we want to set up a market system. And they identify and we explain as well that, how about if they're earning their payment for the cover crops they're planting and the nitrogen efficiency that they're implementing and the other climate benefits that they're providing in those instances and those interventions. But in the meantime, their 1,200 acres have all been water quality certified and risk assessed and mitigated for any negatives that have occurred. They're creating a stewardship level to earn the right, if you will, a social license to participate in the market. It's something that, I'll be honest with you, the folks tell us that they want to see something like that. They want a mechanism like that says the people that we want to participate, that we want to provide payments to, we want to have that kind of a justification. So it's a real thing, and I didn't want to ignore it. But the summation then being that when we talk about earning the growers are earning this value through their actions and providing that adaptation mitigation benefits, that that value should be provided to them. It should be monetized to them for what they are doing. And we're pursuing that effort in Minnesota through a structure that is already up and running. It exists and is available every day and is certifying farms every day. We have the structure here, and it is standing by. We are ready already. And I'll thank you for that. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Vedlin. I think we have a couple of questions. Representative Poston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir, you said that you have, I think you changed the number to 829 certified producers. Can you give me an idea of what percent of the producers in the state that is?
We're about, Chair and Representative, we are at about 2% of the ag land right now.
2%. Thank you.
Yes, Representative Tapke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my district is Shakopee, and we're in the lower Minnesota watershed district. And one big thing that's a concern of mine and our residents is water quality in the Minnesota River. And what kinds of additional things are you and the associate doing for adding more wetlands and wetland restoration? I know that was one of the things that you talked about, but what kind of focus does that have, as well as looking at, we know that a lot of the runoff comes from tiling and different things, that we keep adding more tiling, which is necessary for water management, but it also increases the amount of particulates and runoff into the Minnesota River. And so what kinds of things are happening on that front for keeping soil where it's supposed to be and making sure that we are doing what we can for wetland management?
Well, thank you, Chair, Representative. I appreciate the question. But I guess I would take the one step back and say when we work with the grower, it is this risk assessment process. So what we are doing then is identifying this baseline of what are the practices, what is going on in this parcel. Is there tile? Are there open tile inlets that are in the field, and could those tile inlets be treated? What is the manner of tillage that is going in terms of what kind of ground cover is going to be there 12 months a year? And the fertilization, of course, that occurs too. Are they following U of M recs for their nitrogen applications? The timing, the placement, and we work with the grower in the way that it works for them, so that they can meet those and mitigate those risks as they are identified. So we are very cognizant of the across the state, all the resource concerns, but certainly in the Minnesota River Valley, that's something that obviously we're quite aware of. And the intervention that we do then is to find the risks that exist on an acre, if you will, and find the ways to mitigate those. So we frankly appreciate we appreciate the work of our local partners when they do the intervention, because what they're doing is finding the actual issues that are at play here. A lot of people want to approach, some people I will say would like to approach conservation more in a way of, I have a menu of 5 practices and I would like you to adopt these because I think they're good. And a grower will look at that and say, well, that doesn't even speak to me. It's not my operations. It's not what I need, and it's not going to be beneficial for the actual risks that are present on my farm. So that's why we have constructed this program from day one and from the ground up of saying, let's mitigate what the concern is, what the risk is being posed to water, what the soil health opportunities are here to correct the challenge. And we really feel like the partnerships that we have increasingly, have always had and are increasingly having with watershed districts, with local parties, to use certification as a tool that's already out there and available to engage in their watershed, in their local region with a mechanism that's awaiting use.
I think we have a couple more questions. Representative Cleburne?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have actually 2 questions, and I'll just give them to you both and see if they're related. So the first question, can farmers approach new carbon offset markets without being part of this MAWQCP? That's question number 1. The second one is, people forget that soybean adoption came with credits in the very beginning, and farmers were paid to mitigate that risk of planting this new crop soybeans. When we are looking at these cover crops that would help our farmers, and we're looking at the valuation of what that risk mitigation credit might look like, is that based on their prior productivity? How kind of is that being assessed? And is that a question that's clear?
Mr. Redlaw?
Chair, Representative, thank you. You're asking how the market would value the planting of a cover crop, something like that?
Right. So if you're going to look at it from risk mitigation standpoint, you wouldn't probably go in and guarantee 100% of what their previous crop might have been. So how is that formula constructed? I guess that's my question.
I think I can answer that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, Representative. On the first one, well, strictly speaking, no, if there is a carbon offset market that exists, a producer can engage with it. There are some efforts that are attempted to be launched out there, and we've spoken with folks at Vice President Indigo Ag, who's talking about their Terraton initiative, and we've discussed opportunities with them. We still having that conversation. It's it'll be interesting to see, but I guess I'd back off further, not without going on too long. But the important aspect of engaging the way we do is that with another party, an ecosystem service marketplace consortium, which is made up of really just the circle core group of founders of that particular initiative includes General Mills and Land O'Lakes and Syngenta and Cargill and others, and they're talking about doing a Minnesota pilot, perhaps, this summer, hopefully, and they believe that certification is important because it provides those 3 pillars that you have to have. I'm looking at everything from a supply standpoint, right? We're supplying these benefits. They're looking at, creating the structure, like you said, of both having a marketplace to begin with, and so their interest is having those pillars in place. Do you have to be water quality certified? No, but if you are, then you've already got baseline, you've already got additive, you've already got contracts, you've got things that they value in structuring these things. To the second point, when you're valuing these, again, I leave that to the market creators. But I think the way that they do approach it is, for instance, with this ecosystem market consortium that we've talked about, ecosystem services market consortium that we're talking to, they're looking at really just components. Are the practices delivering water quality benefits, soil carbon sequestration, or water quantity reduction, or saving water, like through irrigation systems, that sort of thing. So they value it based on that. They don't. The value of the crop doesn't necessarily enter into it at all. It's just that they're valuing those benefits that the market places a value on.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment and then a quick question, I hope. Tile drainage got brought up, and I would just say that there are a lot of folks that say that a field that is tiled in many cases has better water holding capacity than a field that's not tiled. The soil is more mellow. It'll absorb more rain when you get that heavy 2, 3, 4-inch rainfall. So it's not all doom and gloom with tile drainage either. But my question, sir, has to do with on your handout, the baseline, how you establish a baseline. And to me, baseline sounds like something like what is normal. And in these, we're talking about weather extremes, what is normal today? If we're talking sediment runoff, you get a 6-inch rainfall, you're going to get more runoff of water and sediment. So what are you tracking when you're talking about a normal baseline, and how do you establish a baseline in today's erratic weather systems?
Mr. Redlin.
Chair, Representative, thank you. Yeah, I guess the baseline that I'm describing is a little slightly different perspective on that. We're just looking at baseline conditions on that farm. It's not necessarily the response, I guess. What we're talking about, we're saying, what are the existing practices and management that are occurring? That's the baseline we're setting, and then we identify where that changes. And I mean, a lot of what we find is that there no changes are required because, as you well know, there's outstanding stewardship performance going on already, but most farms, there's some things that can be done. So that's what we track as above the baseline, and it is about the resiliency. We certainly define these opportunities to improve soil health, to increase or farms, field, organic matter, those types of things that really buttress and provide that armor against those challenges like you're talking about with these really unpredictable and damaging weather events that are occurring.
All right. Thank you. Representative Lippert.
Thank you, Chair, Mr. Redmond. So my question is very similar to Representative Cleaborn's. And so I think ultimately we need to find ways to put structures together that are essentially paying farmers to be putting carbon in the ground. That's where we need to move. And I have farmers who are in my district who are doing cover crop practices, conservation tillage, who have been approached by Indigo and who are talking about it, very interested in it. I'm very interested in the conversation about the water quality certification program as a structure that allows us to move forward as well. And you may have already said this, but I'll just ask you to say it again. What, in your view, are the steps we need to take to be moving this conversation forward, either strengthening the structure, that water quality certification structure, or providing more connections in this conversation? How do we move this ball down the field?
Mr. Redlin.
Mr. Chair, Representative. Yes, thank you. The water quality certification program, I believe, I've described it a structure that exists, and it wasn't necessarily generated for me. Again, it was from talking with other folks, really nationally, about what is necessary to have a marketplace structure, and those things we talked about. Again, the baseline, the additionality, the recorded additionality, having the contracts, having the social license. You're going to have that to create a program. Those, I mean, you can't engage in this arena without having those systems. They don't necessarily have to be water quality certification, but you will have to have that to do this. So those partners, the Ecosystem Services Marketplace Consortium says, great, we can bolt on to you. They're saying we can just bolt onto your project through our private parties to say we will direct growers through certification as the vehicle to then receive the ecosystem service payment that the buy side, the supply side, I know about, but the buyer side would access that, and that's where their interface occurs. So we are prepared. We're ready already, as I was saying. I think that we obviously would do some more auditing for the purposes that the marketplace would require. We audit our growers randomly as it is, but I imagine when you're in a marketplace system, they would want particular checkups as they might choose for validating and approving their things. But again, we have the personnel; they're already out there doing this work, so we can do those tweaks to the program. And I think that's something that's available. Scale may require some additional benefits or resources. Would achieve additional benefits, but may require additional resources. But the structure is already in place. I think that what we've been actively doing is talking to, as been mentioned a couple times, some different entities that are pursuing efforts in a marketplace already. We're finding that as we really kind of work with a broader array of folks, multiple different agribusinesses within Minnesota, for instance, and other parties or participants, different foundation, McKnight Foundation, the Walton Family Foundation that are participating in efforts. They're finding themselves working more with these collaborations and consortiums rather than the single player efforts in this marketplace. It's all early. It's a little bit of the wild, wild west. Out there right now, but it's also encouraging to see that a structure exists here in Minnesota already, so we don't have to worry about that part of it. And then as the folks kind of find their equilibrium in the marketplace, that we're able to participate. But we're also really excited about the collaboration and conversations that are having through these particular entities. I've mentioned before that the Ecosystem Services Consortium, where that already brings the key leading agriculture corporations as well as funders in Minnesota, but also in participation with NRCS is also a party to that program as well, or that initiative as well. So we feel like we can avoid a little bit of the wildness of the wild, wild west by working with these responsible parties.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Brand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Jordan Redland, we were at Minnesota Ag Expo last Thursday. We were both talking to Herman, the local boots on the ground in this program, and we were talking a little bit about what we're going to talk about here today when this young couple walked by from Winona County. A young farmer, his significant other pushing a baby stroller, the future of Minnesota farming. And he stopped to talk to you real quickly, and it wasn't until later that it kind of hit me. He was talking about how he had recertified, and he seemed to be very happy that he recertified. And so that really hit me as a moment, I guess, to kind of participate once in a while with the people who are actually active with these programs to see how it really impacts. And I hope that farmer understands the impact for his neighbors and his county and participation with the rest of the state as well. It says thank you up there. I want to say thank you to the Department of Agriculture and the MPCA for making this program a reality. 2% down, a lot to go. We look forward to working with you, however. But my question is, what's the cost for an individual like that farmer who walked up and was talking with you for a little while? What's the cost to a farmer to participate in something like this?
Mr. Redland.
Yes, Chair, and Representative, thank you for those comments as well. There's no application fee, there is no cost to seek participation in Ag Wildfire, to seek your certification. There's no upfront costs of any kind. There will be costs when we're talking about management changing or management changes potentially, and conservation implementation. We do have, I expressed it earlier in my comments about the $9 million award that we have set aside just for participants within the program or seeking certification. We have a small scale grant program within our program alone that is a maximum of $5,000, but we've done nearly $1 million with that for growers to adopt practice, cover crops being far and away the biggest use of those dollars, where growers are saying, I can get that small grant, I can buy the seed, I can terminate the seed, and I can get out without having to go through an 18-month process of applications and other approvals and that sort of thing. When we say, like, you want to do a great thing for your operation that works for you, we'll happily assist you with it. So, and then there's, of course, always the opportunity and a realized opportunity, and I think the grower you're talking about is one of those who experienced it, of actually saving money, of coming out ahead through the process of, just greater fertilizer efficiency that they may gain through changing a few things in their operation that they understand that the local agronomist and conservation professional works them through, so that they, ideally that's our favorite outcome, is when they say, well, actually I've got a little bit more on my bottom line now because I participated in this program. But it's at the same time absolutely true that these growers are investing their hard-earned dollars in conservation to participate in this program and just to operate their farms generally before we were ever around.
Thank you. Mr. Cheseth, we're going to move on. Thank you, Mr. Redland, for your presentation. And we're looking at about 20 minutes of for the next parts of your presentation.
Madam Chair, 20 minutes for the rest of all, okay.
For
Yep.
ag, for MDA.
Okay, perfect.
That works.
Well, then I will just briefly talk about, Representative Brand just brought up the issue of cost. And when you're talking about on the farm implementation, and you're asking producers to consider adopting different practices than the ones that they've been using for generations, a very real concern is, what is it going to cost the producer, particularly in this ag economy? So just briefly, I will talk about one of our loan programs at the department. It's the Agricultural Best Management Practices Loan Program. It provides low-interest loans to farmers, rural landowners, and ag businesses to implement practices that prevent or reduce water pollution. It is a revolving loan framework and is used to address a number of environmental problems. The loan itself, it's a maximum of 10-year term, a maximum amount of $200,000 per project or purchase, and a maximum interest rate of 3%. The project review and approval is done on the local level by local units of government. The loans are underwritten and guaranteed by local lenders, and MDA handles most of the paperwork. And the reason why we think that's such an important structure is because it really is tailored to what is needed on the local level. And so the local unit of government has buy-in, obviously the borrower has buy-in, and then the department has buy-in as well. This program was created in 1995. To date, $83 million has been received from state and federal sources, $23 million from the state, $60 million from the federal. 16,000 loans have been issued. We've received $14 million from Clean Water Fund and to improve the program's capacity to help solve some of the pollution issues out there. And Clean Water Fund dollars have supported 849 loans. The practices that the Ag BMP program address carbon sequestration in soils through conservation tillage, precision ag, manure and livestock management, cover crops, buffer strips, perennial cover, and harvestable crops. The Ag BMP program contributes to greenhouse gas reduction by increasing efficiency and effectiveness of fertilizers, reducing waste from leaching and runoff, improving storage, better metering and timing technologies, and practices to improve soil health. And that is a very quick run through of the Ag BMP program.
Okay. I don't see any questions on that, so Representative Anderson?
Just a
Maybe,
quick
yes.
one again, Madam Chair. I represent Stearns County. They do a lot of good things up there. They're SWCD, and talked with their director, and they said demand for this program statewide in 2019 was about $25 million. We're way short of funding to that level. They get about $11 million back in repayments to this revolving fund every year, and we appropriated about $5 million last year in 2019. We're about $8 million short of the demand out there, and this is a good program. It leverages dollars. What do you see as a future in terms of increasing this to make it more available for more farmers to make use of this program?
Mr. Chesser?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Anderson. Well, we certainly at the department have noticed the spike in demand for this program. And of course, I think it'd be safe to say the department would welcome perhaps some budgetary considerations from the legislature to increase our ability to help producers through this program.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, welcome to the committee. Oh, I'm sorry, we have another question. Representative Vang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are there eligibility requirements to be a part of this program?
Chesser.
Madam Chair, Representative Vang, there are. They're pretty basic in terms of meeting them. It's just it's the local borrower working with a local unit of government to ensure that the project or the purchase meets state or county levels for water quality. And that's about it. Of course, they'd have to get a lender involved that would be approve their credit rating and that sort of thing. But the eligibility requirements are fairly easy to satisfy.
All right, thank you. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. My name is Paul Huguenin. I'm the Director of the Ag Marketing and Development Division at the Department of Agriculture. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to highlight 3 existing programs that are administered by my division that can be used by farmers and research to help respond, react, and adapt to pressures from climate change. The first of those programs is definitely not a new one. It's been available for approximately 30 years, and that's the Sustainable Ag Demonstration Grant Program. One of the changes that some of you have seen over the years is that used to be a separate line item in the state budget. It is now funded via the Agri funds. One of the purposes of this program is that it recognizes that farmers are innovators. They always have been. And so the idea behind the SustAg grant programs is to provide funding for farmers to try new ideas on the farm, to demonstrate ideas and then share those results with their colleague farmers and with researchers in general. What works, what doesn't work. Examples of projects that have been funded over the years, things related to cover crops, changing tillage practices, response to changing pest and disease practices, pressures. The priority for applicants is for farmers who apply directly, but we encourage farmers to collaborate with other organizations like Extension or things like the On-Farm Research Network that the Minnesota Wheat Research and Promotion Council works with, so that they're involving other expertise as well. The second of those programs is also funded by Agri, and that's the crop research grants. Now, in my experience, this is arguably the most competitive grant program that we operate out of Agri. The number of good projects always far exceeds the amount of money available. The key part of this program is that this funds projects that are applied research. So we only fund projects that are going to potentially show up on farms in 3 to 7 years. So that's kind of the difference between this pool of funds and what university researchers could approach, say, USDA or other national sources of funding for. It's about $1 million available this fiscal year, and this is one of those projects that researchers can do projects for 2 to 3 years. And so one of the changes that you made last year reinforced our ability to do these 2 to 3 year projects, and we appreciate that. So these two are both funded by Agri. It's important to note that it's funded by Agri, but there's not earmarks for these programs. And so I just wanted to thank this committee for continuing to allow us to have the flexibility we need to fund these programs and to be able to shift resources among these programs based on the quality and quantity of applications, as well as based on emerging industry needs that change sometimes very rapidly over time. The last of the 3 programs is the USDA Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. These are USDA dollars administered by the State Department of Agriculture, a little bit over $1 million a year. These can be research projects. They can also be marketing projects. And so again, researchers can use these funds to respond to some of those changing conditions that we see due to climate. We've done, of course, these are limited to specialty crops, but that's a fairly wide group of products. We've done things with potatoes, hops, apples, turf grass, et cetera. So that's a super quick look at those 3 programs. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, I don't see any questions. Thank you. So we move on. We've got Forever Green Initiative. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Margaret Wagner, and I'm a supervisor of our Clean Water Technical Assistance Unit at the Department of Agriculture. Today I'm here to share information about the Forever Green Initiative, specifically new implementation activities. As a quick background, the Forever Green Initiative is led by the University of Minnesota with strong support from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture and many others. Forever Green supports the development of new perennial and winter annual crops and cropping systems. Perennials, cover crops, and winter annuals have many environmental benefits. For example, they sequester more carbon as compared to an annual cropping system. They contribute to building soil health. They require less nitrogen inputs and overall less energy, as perennial systems require less annual tillage. So we hope to realize these environmental benefits as we start to implement and plant Forever Green crops out on the Minnesota landscape. Forever Green has a strong interdisciplinary research focus and a new emphasis on implementation and commercialization of crops. What I want to highlight today is really some of the new implementation activities that are being supported with Clean Water Fund dollars. So starting this biennium, there is $500,000 available to implement field-scale plantings of intermediate wheatgrass, that's also known as Kernza. Kernza is one of a few kind of leading-edge crops, or those crops that are closest to commercialization within the portfolio of Forever Green. The Department of Agriculture has worked closely with the University of Minnesota to focus implementation of Kernza in areas of the state with vulnerable groundwater. That means we're going to be planting the field-scale plantings in areas that have vulnerable groundwater to immediately realize those benefits of having perennials. In these areas of the landscape, as illustrated by the green circles on the slide, these areas are clusters, or where we will be working with the University of Minnesota, farmers, agronomists, and local partners to grow Kernza with technical support from the University of Minnesota agronomists. These projects focus on crop management. They focus on the development of contracts for the growing of Kernza in Minnesota, and they focus on logistics, harvesting, storage, transportation, and really support of profitable markets. This is a really exciting step for the program. Together, the University of Minnesota, the Department of Ag, and a lot of local partners will help farmers manage 1,000 acres of Kernza in the next few growing seasons. The benefits will be realized in areas with vulnerable groundwater as we collect more data and information to build the local capacity and inform future plantings.
Thank you. I know we have at least one question. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for coming and presenting briefly. It's probably going to surprise some people that I'm actually very supportive of the Forever Green program, but one key element to it, and I'm curious to know where this is at. I know that the team is always driven towards this cover crop implementation through a Forever Green will work when it's profitable for the producer who's implementing this. Can you tell me, I know there's been some success and some not success with that, and I haven't been updated in the last year or two, so can you address that part of it? Are you finding ways in which farmers can implement this Forever Green program at a way that's advantageous for them as a business?
Yeah.
Ms. Wagner.
Madam Chair, Representative, thanks for that question. There are others here from the Forever Green team that can go into more detail. What I can tell you is that is a focus of this pilot project. And so really getting the material out on the landscape, collecting that data and information about the economics, and then working with the end user as we think about market development and supply. So there are some success stories. I think we've heard about General Mills. We've heard about brewing beer with Patagonia. We now have a handful of local breweries, Minnesota breweries, and then a longer list of breweries waiting for seed. And so the market is there. We're still collecting that information, and it's a big emphasis here to get that profitability question answered.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the testifier, the one thing you didn't mention was plant breeding or trying to improve the yield. At least I didn't hear that. And I was at a wheat growers meeting in Morris a couple of weeks back, and the university is doing some work in this. But the Kernza, at least growing out in the western part of the state, the yield is so far below other wheat varieties, it's pretty difficult to, as Representative Miller mentioned, to grow this profitably. So what's being done as far as plant breeding, trying to improve the yield of Kernza?
Ms. Wagner.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Anderson, thanks for the question. So I did focus today's presentation on implementation, and I mentioned there's $500,000 for Clean Water for implementation. There's also $3.8 million from Clean Water this biennium that'll be focused on research to answer questions, as you mentioned. So currently, the current variety of Kernza is about 1/3 of the yield of traditional wheat, and there have been big improvements within the plant breeding. Minnesota Clearwater, the newest variety, was released this fall, and looking forward to about a 3-year timeline to see another improved variety come out of the wheat breeding lab at the University of Minnesota. So it's in the pipeline, and we'll see another variety soon with improved yields.
Representative Brand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a comment quick. I live in St. Peter, which isn't at Duisma. We've got Kernza finally in Nicollet County for the first time ever, so I really appreciate that. For 7 years, I was a city council member in St. Peter. We worried a lot about making sure we had good quality drinking water for our folks, for our children. As important as they were developing, that they have good clean water. And so I welcome any additional agricultural plots in Nicollet County and going forward. It's not just Nicollet County also. It's all over my region where there are challenges as we talk about well testing and things like that. We talked a little bit about that in the Legislative Water Commission as well, the importance of testing wells. But in dealing with nitrates, especially in dense populations like St. Peter, I just really wanted to say thank you for focusing on that first.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Wagner. I think we don't have any other questions. So, Mr. Cheseth, then you have one more portion here.
Yes, Madam Chair, but that's it from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture.
Okay. Thank you. Then, good timing. So we'll move on. We've got Craig McDonald and Frank Kolish. So we're bringing up the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Thank you to the MDA for coming forward and giving the full presentation. So now MPCA, welcome to the committee.
And then you're down here. How did you get rid of that one? Can you close that one? I don't care.
And there are packets in the materials, so.
I guess you need it to close. And then I'll scroll down here. Oh, jeez.
And while they're working on that, just a couple of announcements. One is that we will break for lunch, approximately noon, hopefully, we'll get to that point. And then at about 10 to 1, before the committee reconvenes, there will be a demonstration. So Dr. Drager is here, and she's going to do a informal presentation on soil samples. So you can come back for that if you so choose. That would be at 10 to 1, and then we'll reconvene at 1.
This one?
And this afternoon, we'll have more of the research discussion, the University of Minnesota, and then some other experiences from the field, so. But I think we're ready to go, so MPCA, welcome, and just introduce yourself, and then go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Craig McDonald, and I serve as an Assistant Commissioner for Air and Climate Policy at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And we are here today to talk about a recent report that the department released in the fall of 2019, last October, greenhouse gas emissions reduction potentials from the agricultural sector, focusing specifically on some of the best management practices that we all know. So we're excited for today's conversation and to highlight the role MPCA plays here. Before turning it over to my colleague, Frank Kolash, who is our technical expert and the Director of Climate at the PCA, I think it's important to just take a moment to look at greenhouse gas emissions total. And this is a chart that is based on our 2016 greenhouse gas emissions inventory. We are updating that as we speak, and we'll be rolling it out in December of 2020, our next report. So this is greenhouse gas emissions based on 2016 data. As you can see there, transportation and the power generation sector are the two largest emitting sectors currently, each representing about 26% of the state's total emissions. Followed after that is the agricultural and forestry and land use sector, which is about 22% of the emissions total. So with that kind of as a background, I think it's important to note that there's real potential in the agricultural sector, in addition to these other sectors, to really kind of make some progress and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But a key step for that was the research that Frank will discuss in a moment that allows farmers to take credit for the agricultural conservation that they're already doing, as well as making sure that we can calculate the benefits for programs like the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program, as well as programs that our colleagues at Bowser are also putting out there to put ag BMPs on the land. And with that, I will turn it over to Frank.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representatives. My name again is Frank Kolash. I'm the Climate Director for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and I'm going to go over some of the slides in more detail on the report that Assistant Commissioner McDonald mentioned. So looking more closely at the emissions within the agricultural sector, this slide shows how those break down. And what we're seeing is that crop agriculture is the largest source of emissions in the agricultural land use and forestry sector. What that also represents is that we think that there's a significant opportunity for reductions and sequestering of carbon and achieving climate benefits within this sector based on this data. You'll also see that there is a significant input from the animal agriculture side, and then we're looking at the way that the nutrients run off into the waters, and then the amount of oil, the fossil fuels that are used in the agricultural sector. But today's comments will speak primarily to what is happening in that crop agricultural side. And then within the report that Assistant Commissioner McDonald mentioned, we laid it out when we started with 21 different best management practices that were identified through the statewide nutrient reduction program, because what we wanted to do was accomplish a couple of goals. One was understand the climate benefits that may be coming from the efforts that the state was already putting forth to protect water quality and the significant amount of resources and attention that that was receiving. And then also just being up to date with our greenhouse gas emissions reporting processes so that we can improve our inventory and understand where greenhouse gases are coming within Minnesota. So the first slide here shows the impacts of greenhouse gas protections that come when we change the land use of agricultural lands. And so these are conversion and types of practices. These are removing lands from productive use in the agricultural sector and then putting them back into a more natural structure. And that is, it's very common to see that those have the highest per acre input benefit. So we're seeing quite a bit of carbon benefit in the amount of carbon that is stored if land is returned to forest or to prairies, also increases in the soil organic carbon. We understand that while these on a per acre basis have very high benefits, they may not be able to have as many acres as we would like to see because it is difficult to convert land from productive use back into these natural systems. And then the final piece, there was a question earlier on the wetlands, and you'll see that the wetlands has a slight increase in greenhouse gases. And there's three important pieces to understand with that. One is that the wetlands is what we term a preliminary assessment. Because the literature is so complex and still building, we still want to review what the literature is saying about that over thousands of different pieces of literature talking about wetlands. Two, wetlands have a wide diversity of, especially in the constructed and reconstructed wetlands, what their purposes are, how they've been reconstructed, what functions are they playing. So we need to be able to understand all of that diversity of different wetlands and what roles they play. And then third and important, and it lies through all of the estimates you're going to see here, is that estimate is based on those wetlands and reconstructed wetlands only existing for 20 years. And that really just does change the climate and the carbon calculations within wetlands. If we were to extend out these wetlands existing for 40 years or for 100 years, then we see them becoming to have climate benefits. But we were looking to have a consistent methodology so we could compare various land use practices, and we chose 20 years as the most likely and reasonable application. And what you see within the wetlands is at 20 years, we see less carbon benefit than we do if they are in place for quite a bit longer. Now, the next set of practices keep agricultural land in production, but change the way that the management practices in the land is used within its applications. And so we're starting to see here the reduced tillage, low till, cover crops, the combinations of those having different kinds of rotations and different kinds of land practices. And where we see within these various practices, again, benefits to the climate, benefits to greenhouse gas emission reductions by just changing some of these practices. And it keeps the land in production, it protects water quality, it improves soil health, and it also has a climate benefit. And while they may be lower on a per acre basis, we think that there is an opportunity because a lot of acres could be placed into these kinds of practices to generate larger and larger benefits. And then the final list is about how nutrients are handled, especially the nitrogen use on lands. And all of these are preliminary because of the complexity of the literature and understanding how these apply to Minnesota soils and how the biogeochemical processes are. We're going to have to continue to look at the research and understand what the benefits that we can see here. And here you see, again, some more mixed results about how this is happening, but again, there are opportunities within the nutrient management process and systems that can play a climate benefit. And then also being aware of some of what the negative impacts could be so that we can try to understand how those are working and understand if there are other opportunities with that. So with that, that concludes the Pollution Control Agency's presentation, and we will take questions if you have them.
All right. Representative Lewitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going all the way back to the first page on your graphs, for the ag, forestry, and land use, the big green one, you got these fairly big spikes up and down over that time period. Can you explain, when you got some of these that are very sharp, either increases or decreases? I'm assuming that that's an aggregate of ag, forestry, and land use. Can you be more specific? That's kind of a, it would tell me that you got a baseline there that looks pretty scary, pretty shaky and unpredictable. I mean, when you look at the graph.
Mr.
So
Kohler.
can you explain that?
Madam Chair, Representative, thank you for the question. And I'll switch to the next graph. And what you'll see within that graph is the variation that we're seeing in the amount of carbon that we're calculating on an annual basis that is sequestered or held within, stored within Minnesota's forests. And we're continuing to work with the Department of Natural Resources to understand how we better accommodate those measures, because that is a difficult type of measure to make. But what you're seeing in that variation is really coming down to how we're calculating the amount of carbon that is stored each year with the increase in growth in Minnesota's forests. And so that's where the jump around. If you look at the crop agriculture, you'll see that it has remained mostly steady, slightly growing in the most recent years, and not as much variation as we see in the carbon storage with forestry.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I say it would be helpful, though, a lot of people look at the first page and that's the last thing they register. And so you might be helpful to break that out a little more, even in these macro graphs, because first look at that is you've got an unpredictable future based on that time set. But yeah, this seems to explain it a little better, because you can see wide variations in the forestry, but you might want to really consider about being a little more granular on your presentation in that area. Thank you.
All right.
Just going to say, Madam Chair, Representative Lipp, thank you for the comment.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Representative Lippert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I really appreciate the MPCA's work on this report. I think it's very, very helpful to start figuring out the carbon sequestration capacities of these practices. And as I've looked at it, I've just been trying to figure out, as a layperson, how to make sense of it and how to be connecting it to some other numbers. So one question I have is related to scale. So the state of Maryland, for instance, has 50% of their agricultural land in cover crops. Indiana has 11%. We have 3% in Minnesota. So what sort of carbon sequestration impact might it have if Minnesota gets to 10%, if we get to 25? Are you able to make those sorts of calculations based on this research that's happened here is one question. And then another is just like easily digestible impact comparison. So how do we compare that to the number of vehicles we would take off the road, for instance? Are you able to make those sorts of connections with this research?
Madam Chair, Representative Lippert, I can answer the first or the second part of your question. I'll let Frank talk to the scale. That is an ongoing challenge for us as an agency generally, is how do we make data digestible? And we can, and we have. I direct you to the fact sheet that you just received. There's a fact there that 25 acres of cover crops remove as much atmospheric carbon as taking one car off the road. So we're continuing to iterate on these facts that we can try to put some scale and some sense behind it, so folks are not just looking at raw data with those numbers. So if you have ideas for that, for facts and figures that are really helpful that cement the problem, we'd be happy to hear that. And to the second part of the question, or the first part, excuse me, I'd let Frank answer.
Mr. Collette.
Madam Chair, Representative Lippert, that's an important question that we've been asking ourselves about the scale that we can ramp that up. And that's where we're starting to work with more closely with the Department of Agriculture, the Board of Water and Soil Resources, but also with the University of Minnesota to have that kind of analysis to look at what's possible in Minnesota. So we don't have that number right now, but what we're looking at and trying to figure out what is economically available and viable for these various practices. And we're going to work with the University of Minnesota to have that later this spring. What we can say is that we looked at the statewide nutrient reduction plan, which set certain goals and targets for land practices uses to protect water quality in Minnesota. And we looked at if all of those practices were put into place, and we'd see about a 5 to 10% reduction in the agricultural land use forestry sector if all of those acres that were called for in the statewide nutrient reduction plan were converted to those kinds of best management practices. So that's our best equivalency right now, but we don't have anything just yet that says if we reached a certain number of acreage on any particular combination of land best management practices, what the reduction would be used. And then taking your other comment into place of trying to put that into equivalents that people can maybe more easily understand. But what we do see are that the number of acres that Minnesota has available and the types of benefits that we see from many of these practices, that we see that there's significant opportunities for climate protection, for water quality protection, for soil health improvement, the cleansing, making our biofuels cleaner, and how that impacts the farmers and the rural economy.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I don't see any, so thank you for the presentation. And then we'll have hear from the Board of Water and Soil Resources. So we've got there's also information in the packet.
That's you, right? Yep. Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez. God. I wonder why it's not real. Why don't you just start? Maybe click this one. Look at you.
All right, welcome to the committee. So just state your name and then begin your presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. Angie Becker-Kadelka, Assistant Director with the Board of Water and Soil Resources. And with me today,
Dan Shaw, Senior Ecologist and Vegetation Specialist with the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources.
So, Madam Chair and members, I think as we've all already seen this morning, understanding and acting on climate change issues is really an administrative-wide issue and response, and also based on your legislative directives in conservation. We've seen from the Department of Ag how market-based research has considerations and opportunities. We've just seen from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency how to identify what some of those issues are and some of the best management practices to respond to them. The Board of Water and Soil Resources, our model is to work in partnership with local organizations and with private landowners. Around 75% of Minnesota is in private land, so we realize if we're going to make progress on issues regarding soil, water, climate change, that we know that some of that progress needs to be made on private land. And so our job is working through a local conservation delivery system with those folks who live and work in the same places as landowners to get on the ground results. In working with other agencies and from the National Climate Assessment from the U.S. Global Change Research Program, we know that there are leading indicators of climate change in Minnesota. Heavy rainfall events in Minnesota are already becoming larger and more common, and the need for best management practices to store water on the landscape is greater than ever before. Extreme weather events have the potential to impact the quality of water and soil resources throughout Minnesota and to decrease the ability of our landscapes to sustainably provide economic and environmental benefits. Here's a picture of after several days of sustained rainfall in northern Minnesota. This is just north of Duluth. Here's a cliff that has sloughed off. So we know that more frequent, heavier, longer durations of rain events will increase soil erosion and runoff. Here's a picture of a farm field. And with increased weather and soil erosion, we also know that means increased runoff from fertilizers and pesticides and sediments, and it puts pressure on the state's drainage infrastructure. And so Mr. Shaw is going to talk about some of those climate trends and our action plans.
Madam Chair and members, Bowser's first climate planning document was published in 2013, and then we recently updated the document in 2019. This most recent document includes updated strategies based on current science to adapt to extreme precipitation and other impacts of climate change. It also includes updated calculations of climate mitigation benefits of conservation practices based on the PCA's work. Many of Bowser's initiatives have benefits for climate change. We have an overall emphasis on restoring resilient landscapes, and that's through our implementation and the planning work that we do. Restoring soil health has been a big initiative. Effective water management, treatment, and use has become a big emphasis because of extreme precipitation. That's addressed partly through One Watershed, One Plan and other local water planning. And then the conservation practices that Bowser funds, there's a series of them that help address this issue. Also, collaboration with our partners in rural and urban communities is another big focus. And in urban areas, green infrastructure and urban forests. We have different programs that have specific benefits for mitigating climate change and adaptation, increasing landscape resiliency. And we'll talk in more detail about each of these in the upcoming slides. So buffers and field borders are definitely playing an important role, reduced tillage, grassland restoration, and then also fertilizer management. Our estimates are about 300,000 metric tons of CO2 per year are being reduced through these practices. Bowser provides cost share and other program pass-through funds for local governments to work directly with landowners to implement a range of conservation practices. These practices are estimated to reduce around 300,000 metric tons, so they're playing an important role. And there is a range of these different practices. We also have a large number of acres and conservation easements that help manage water, increase landscape resiliency, and sequester carbon. Grassland conversion is a large emitter of greenhouse gases, and protecting grasslands like CRP is an important role of these conservation programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The current Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, also known as CREP, combines federal and state funding to provide permanent land protection options. And these lands tend to include wetland acres on many of them, in addition to prairie restoration. And so this map shows the priority area for the CREP initiative, has a goal of 60,000 acres over 5 years. And there's buffer projects that are part of this wetlands wellhead protection as well as part of this CREP initiative. Wetlands also are playing a role. They play an important role in water storage with the extreme weather that we've been having. They play an important role of holding that excess water, and so that's an important part of the wetlands. Particularly meadow wetlands, wetlands that have saturated soil provide an important carbon sequestration benefit as well and play a role in mitigating climate change.
We know that these programs are all part of a larger goal around soil health. Soil contains and has the potential to contain vast amounts of carbon. And so the same practices that are known to improve soil health and water quality can also increase carbon sequestration. With the University of Minnesota, the Board of Water and Soil Resources began a program called the Minnesota Office for Soil Health. And so the point of the Minnesota Office for Soil Health is to take the research and be able to apply it to work directly with landowners. Here's a demonstration day. This happened this fall just outside of Northfield. And what you'll see there is erosion potential. So the tube on the left is conventional tilled soil, and the tube on the right is no-till soil. And so this shows, when you add water to it, it shows the erosion potential of those two types of soil. So most agricultural best management practices that improve water quality and soil health then can also help mitigate the effects of climate change.
Bowser and other agencies are focusing a lot of attention on cover crops. There really is a lot of benefits of cover crops. They provide a protective canopy that can greatly reduce erosion and runoff while increasing infiltration. Cover crops increase soil organic matter, which can improve soil health. It also helps during times of drought to have that additional organic material in the soil. They can reduce the amount of nitrogen fertilizer needed, potentially lowering costs of production, and provide high-quality grazing for livestock and food sources for wildlife, such as beneficial insects and pollinators. Several studies are underway to better understand how to maximize the benefits of cover crops. Demonstration projects also play an important role with understanding how to most effectively use cover crops. Bowser recently awarded $1 million to 5 soil and water conservation districts for cover crop demonstration grants. We'll be working with producers interested in incorporating cover crops into their operations, and this will have a focus on new adopters. Local conservation staff will provide technical assistance, financial incentives, and education to local landowners. And so this is one of our newer initiatives to focus on cover crops. A significant benefit of cover crops, particularly on erosion-prone land, is that they can provide an added layer of protection over conventional tillage from extreme weather. And we've seen this in different parts of the state where we've had extreme weather over the last several years and where there's been a lot of movement of soil. Pollinator habitat also plays an important role in the resiliency of landscapes. It's estimated that about 35% of our food crops are pollinated by bees, and so they're playing an important role. We have a new Lawns to Legumes program with Bowser that's focused on benefiting the federally endangered rusty patch bumblebee by establishing habitat in urban and rural landscapes through planting, information workshops, coaching, and reimbursement for yard projects. We have a current application period that's open through February 28th through this program. And Bowser is also focusing on pollinator habitat on our conservation easements through pollinator plots and other efforts as well. Ultimately, through conservation partnerships, these practices that we've been focusing on provide opportunities to really combine different benefits within landscapes. So these are water storage benefits, carbon storage, soil health, water quality, habitat, recreational opportunities on easements, and landscape resiliency.
So to wrap up, we recognize that there isn't just one solution, and that private landowners may need different options on how to best manage their land. And so this is a conservation continuum of landowner choice. So on the one hand, on the left-hand side, a landowner may choose to do work on their land with no outside support or no assistance, to getting technical assistance, doing short-term contracts, all the way up to perpetual land easements. And with that, we stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? Yes, Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair Poppy, and to the testifiers. On your soil and water conservation grants, I believe you said that 300,000 metric tons of CO2 per year have been reduced through that grant implementation. And in the Department of Ag's Ag Water Certification Program, they have an estimation of 40,000 tons reduced. My question is, what's the ultimate goal? What number, once agriculture obtains that, where everybody's going to be satisfied? What do we need to be reaching for, I guess?
Madam Chair and members, that's a very good question. I think that's something that between agencies and other partners, we actually need more discussion about what is it we really need to reach to get to our ultimate goals. definitely the more conservation practices we can collectively get on the ground, it's going to be having additional carbon sequestration benefits to see those changes. There's been some estimates about cover crops that if a quarter of Minnesota croplands would have cover crops, we'd be reducing emissions by about 1 million tons, equivalent of taking about 200,000 cars off of the road. And so there is huge potential with cover crops and these other practices. And I think as we move ahead, we do need to collaborate with other agencies and partners to figure out, what are these goals we need to try to get to. We're looking at pretty small benefits right now, I think. With our programs, we think there's about a 2% reduction of the ag sector emissions with our current practices that we do. And so there is a lot of room for improvement there. And so any cost share programs that we can do or increase moving ahead is going to have incremental steps moving forward.
Madam Chair. Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the testifiers, when do you think you can have that number for us, that targeted number?
Ms. Kudelka.
Madam Chair and Representative, the larger scale question that I think you're getting at is one of that's bigger maybe than all of us in this room. The governor issued an executive order earlier in the year saying that he wanted agencies to come together and he wanted to form a sub-cabinet around climate change. And so that sub-cabinet brings across a broad sector of folks to take a look at and understand and try to better quantify, because right now, honestly, we are in the early stages of understanding. And so we know right now that the work that is being done in our types of programs and practices contribute to about 2% of the overall agricultural-based emissions. And I think the overall quantification of that in climate change goals is something that the sub-cabinet and others around the state are trying to review and understand and determine.
All right, any other questions? I don't see any. Right, so, all right, thank you for the presentation. And so we are at the point where we will be breaking for lunch. We'll come back, if you choose to come back in an hour, so at 10:02, you can see Dr. Drager give the presentation, and otherwise we'll reconvene at 1. And before you leave, we do have a couple of bills if people are interested in signing on. One is for RFA, for the Rural Finance Authority, authorizing the sale of the bonds, $50 million, and that's the request by the department to replenish those funds. So I've got a couple of people that for sure I'd like to see sign on to that bill, but if anybody else would like to, we can do that. And I think Representative Lippert has a bill as well. And do you want to just describe your bill for people to sign on? If you.
It's a bill related to grants for soil health practices as well.
Okay. All right. So if people want to read those and sign on to those, that would be great. Otherwise, we will stand in recess and reconvene at 1 p.m.